Imagine you're home, you're gathered in a living room with partner and children, and there's a knock at the door. You open it to two male policemen. They tell you they need to talk to your daughter. You're completely surprised, and your first thought is your child has gotten in trouble with the police, and that's why they need to talk to her. The two male police officers enter your home and say they need to talk to your child outside. But once outside with her, they proceed to escort your child into a police vehicle with tinted windows. You plead with the police to explain what is happening, at which point the officers don't provide any details, only saying they're going to a local children's hospital and they get in the car. You try looking through the dark windows to see your child and you try to talk to them, but the windows don't open and the car drives away. In November 2020, Bernard Lane reported that family's story in The Australian. A 15-year-old girl in Western Australia was taken by the state, taken to a gender ward of a hospital and later put on testosterone and scheduled for double amputation of her breasts. And to this day, her parents haven't seen her for 2.5 years. What's disturbing is that wasn't a one-off. According to the Australian branch of the Rapid Onset Gender Dysphoria Parent Support Group, as of September 2021 last year, there's nearly 100 other families in that same situation as that family in Western Australia. Now I'm betting that you, the audience, people watching this, weren't aware. When I first found out, I was stunned. And I felt like it was unreal. Like, how can this be happening in this country, Australia? How can anyone do that? You know, how is it that Australian states can take a child away from her family without any crime that they've committed, without discussion with any authority, social worker, teacher, parent, anyone, without any recourse for the family to get a hearing and to stop it? And the answer to that is a little bit of a tangled web. I'm not going to cover that tangled web in this talk. I've actually covered it in the business model of youth transitioning. Look it up. If you're new to this and you want to get an idea of the size and scope of the fight we're engaged in, just do an exercise before you dismiss this. Go to Wikipedia and type in transgender rights in the name of your country you're in. New Zealand, Canada, UK, America, Australia. And you'll notice you're going to find a result that will give you a chart saying yes or no to a series of questions. This is a chart for transgender rights in Australia. If you go to the pages 24 to 27 and 55 of that booklet on the left of the screen, Only Adults, Good Practices and Legal Gender Recognition for Youth, you'll find the trans activists are saying yes or no to the laws that the world's largest law firm, Dentons, instructs trans activists to put into place into their respective country. Colloquially, we call that booklet the Dentons Handbook. It was produced by Dentons, Thomas Reuters. It was funded by a number of pharmaceutical foundations, and it was produced for youth trans activists, originally for the Iglio group, but now it's youth trans activists all over the world. Kids coming out of university and the queer theory, gender humanity stuff, all that kind of stuff. Quietly, but under the radar. But in fact, you can track this trans activist international project on Wikipedia. And the goal of that project is to embed gender identity ideology into law into every country. But what I want to talk to you specifically about is the harm of public schools here in Australia being used as a vehicle for ideological capture of teachers and parents and children in order to socially and medically transition students for the transgender industry. And I want to enroll as many of you as possible to fight against it. Late last year I approached Maura Deming. I got her on Sky News late last year. She's a teacher, she's a counsellor over Melbourne, she's an awesome speaker. And she's been sharing some very disturbing stuff in the schools as a result of the SOGI training. SOGI stands for Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity. I suggested we do a website and collect the stories of parents and teachers. There's such a hush and a shutdown of any conversation on this topic. And we called it In Defense of Children. If you go to our site, and please do, you'll see on the front pages we say, in Australian schools, why are some children being told they may be born in the wrong body? And why are they being told they can use drugs and surgery to fix this wrong body? Why is a child who suddenly changes their gender being celebrated as if it's the instant solution to feelings of unhappiness about going through puberty, for example, or just being different in some way? And a guaranteed gateway to the perfect life. And why are parents and teachers being urged to support this change and discouraged from exploring underlying problems? I say at the heart of this is a lie and a propaganda that's been framed as a human rights issue that spreads state and nationwide by those signed up to a compliance audit to gender identity ideology given by trans activist lobbies. Stonewall UK over in England, ACON primarily over here, but there's a number of them popping up, modelling themselves after ACON. It's a lie that fuels financial benefits for the pharmaceutical companies, unethical medical professionals, and the booming transgender industry, and has some political benefits for the state. The lie is this, that there are trans children. There is not. The identifying marker for teachers and gender ideologists of children they label as trans is gender non-conformity, gender non-conforming behaviour. They're not performing consistently with the stereotypes attached to being male or female. In the past, most gender non-conforming children will, after puberty, typically present as lesbian, gay, or bisexual, and to a lesser extent, autistic, and these days, a large number of girls are wanting to escape femalehood. It takes puberty, sometimes working through gender dysphoria, and time for youth to realise their sexual orientation. In public schools, what we're seeing is those children aren't given that time. They are stopped before they go through that process. In the schools, we're seeing gender non-conforming children being labelled trans, an idea that children have a gender identity that does not match the body they should have. In line with this idea, a female child more likely to grow up lesbian is expected to present as a trans boy, and a gender non-conforming male is expected to identify as a trans girl. The problem is once a child is identified as trans, schools are obliged by state education policies in Australia to follow a gender identity affirmation process, which involves influencing children to plan for their gender affirmation journey, to first socially transition and later start on puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, access gender affirmative counselling so that they can alter their bodies and socially present as straight. Instead of a future healthy life with body intact, the impact of LGBT, autistic and other vulnerable children, not just gay, potentially gay kids, are put on puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones, sets them on course for lifetime pharmacological dependence and increased risk of cardiovascular disease, osteoporosis, thrombosis, sterility and likelihood of sexual dysfunction. Stripping back the diversity language, all this is conforming gender non-conforming LGBT kids, autistic kids and other vulnerable kids, primarily girls, to a heterosexual norm. In the LGBT community, as it relates to young LGBT, this is a new spin on an old conversion therapy. The old conversion therapy would alter gay kids' minds to make them straight, but now what's happening is not just gay kids, but gender critical kids, gender non-conforming kids, whether they turn out gay or not, if they are gender non-conforming, they're altering their bodies to make them appear straight. What do I mean by a state education policy? What does that look like? Around gender identity affirmation for you, the parent, what does it mean? To give an example, let's look at the state of Victoria. It's the wokest state of them all. We read the following from the Department of Education website. There may be circumstances in which students wish or need to undertake gender transition without the consent of their parents or carers and or without consulting medical practitioners. Let me just turn the next page. Look, I'll just point out at this time, in all other areas, the teacher has to, needs to instruct or ask parents permission for things like consent to give Panadol to the child, keeping back kids for detention, 10 minutes or anything like that, to take photographs of the kid, permission to go on camps or daily excursions, everything. They have to ask parents permission. But this is an exception set by the state that parental permission is not required to socially transition, allow children to receive experimental drugs or have their bodies surgically altered. Let's look at another quote. Where a student under the age of 18 asked to decide instead of their parent or carer, principals or others working with students in the school can decide that the student is capable of making their own decision, i.e. that they are mature minor, remember that phrase, for the purpose of making a particular decision. To be considered a mature minor, principals or others working with students must be satisfied that the student has sufficient maturity, understanding and intelligence to understand the nature and effects of their particular decision. What does this mean? What this means is in the different states, the public schools can socially transition any child under the age of 18 behind the parents' backs without their consent or knowledge. This includes providing a new name and pronouns in all school documents, providing opposite-sex uniforms, and encouraging and allowing access to opposite-sex toilets, change rooms and sports teams. This also includes instructing the entire school community to affirm that a child has somehow become a member of the opposite sex. How? Any adult working with a child in a Victorian school can confer legal mature minor status on any child of any age without any relevant qualifications. That person doesn't have any relevant qualifications, psychology, psychiatry, psychoanalyst, medical, blah, 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 nothing at all. And they don't have to involve parental involvement at all. Mature minors are deemed able to consent to medical and psychological treatments, and after age 12, all children can deny their parents access to their medical records. Thus, after the age of 12, Victorian children can make medical decisions to start puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, access gender affirmative counselling, and parents have no legal right to know about it or to stop it, even when it all happens on school grounds and within school hours. I think you should feel, as I do, that this is a chilling overreach for the state to remove the rights of parents to the care and well-being of their children in public schools. Okay, so once a gender non-conforming child is identified, there's a process. They create a plan. What I'm sharing here is quotes from the Victorian state process. You can look them up yourself. So far, New South Wales and Queensland are following a similar process. I haven't yet got to Tasmania, Western Australia, South Australia, etc. I need help, by the way, just a heads up. Anyone else who's concerned about this, please contact me and we can do some more research on this, please. But note that particular quote on the bottom. The plan should be developed in consultation with the student and their parents or carers where possible, and should be reviewed periodically to ensure that it reflects the needs of the student at the different stages of their transition and at different stages of their education. So when you hear the word affirmation, you always think that it's actually confirming something that's actually there. This is not true. You've got a child of 5, 8, 9, 10, 12, 11 who's growing and exploring and going through a process which should be a normal process of getting to know themselves. It's an unknown. Okay. To have then the whole school community to decide that this child should present as the opposite sex is basically a grooming process, and have them take them through all the transition stages, which I'm going to show you in a moment. This is a conveyor belt. And I want to point out, the first major part of this process is social transitioning. Okay, this doesn't mean that there's an absence of physical harm. For example, the use of, they call them chest binders, but they're actually breast binders on girls, squishing your breasts in. They're worn on average 10 hours a day, and every day causes, for most, regular back pain, overheating, chest pain, shortness of breath, how is it responsible for a school to encourage children to put themselves in a situation of pain and think that that is in any way conducive to learning in a classroom? And then there's toilet issues. On our website, as I said, in defenseofchildren.org, we've been receiving submissions, and recently we got a submission from a mother that said girls in her daughter's class aren't using the toilets because the boys delight in breaking the rules, because now they can say they're a girl, and they like looking underneath the toilet doors, etc., and just teasing the girls, as boys do. Her daughter has developed urinary and bladder issues because of the necessity to hold it until she gets home. Or sometimes she just leaves the school grounds to find a toilet. Okay? And note, once you go through this social transitioning process, it's less likely that process will stop there. Children tend to become less comfortable with their biological sex, and they therefore move forward on this fast-moving conveyor belt towards hormones and surgery. Just have a look at that little picture there. You're putting replicas of penises and testicles in little girls' pants. How are you not telling that girl that there's something lacking in her body? And you're surrounding her with people saying so as a child. So what we've noticed is that socially transitioning a child impacts actually the whole school, not just that child, because there is a culture of deceit with teachers lying to or deceiving parents. And understand something. What we've got from teachers is that kids know the teachers are lying about this, because everybody in the school is involved in this transitioning of this one child. So what kind of impact do you think it has on children to know that the teachers are encouraging everyone to lie? Then there's LGBTQIA clubs. I'm not quite sure what they call them over here. Overseas they call them GSA clubs. They have a cult-like recruitment function there. The teachers usually target vulnerable children. And they use it also as clubs for kids who want to be allies to these highly marginalized kids, as they say, and indoctrinate them to become allies. Now, here's something Maura said to me really stuck, where she said, what's the opposite of ally? In a war scenario, that's the enemy, isn't it? She said recently in school, a teacher got the kids to all stand up, and had to stand up if they were and chant some statements of allegiance to supporting trans children. One child didn't stand up. They kept seated throughout the whole process. And after that, after the kid got out of school, they were bullied. Okay, they were snobbed and bullied and frowned upon by everyone for not giving allegiance to the trans child or the trans ideology. Not only that, staff have to receive SOGI, sexual orientation, gender identity training / indoctrination, as part of professional development. And it's not just girls that have an issue about privacy, it's boys also. Girls and boys have an issue of the opposite sex coming into their changing rooms and toilets, And note at this stage, coming to the end of the socially transitioning, once they're sort of solid in it, the school can call on gender clinics like the Melbourne's Royal Children's Hospital, colloquially known as Michelle's Telfer's Clinic. If they need advice, they call them gender identity specialists on whether the child is ready for the next stage. So in other words, you're going to someone who gets paid to surgically and medically transition these kids. You're asking them if they need to have their services. Guess what the answer is? Now on our site, underneath child abuse, we've got a lot of data that's been backed up by psychologists, psychiatrists, psychoanalysts, the best, and it's been approved by heads of different organisations, CGIM for example, on the physical harms of things like cross-sex hormones, puberty blockers, etc. So go to the facts on that. I'm not going to repeat it here. But understand that trans activists saying puberty blockers pause puberty. Their lie is that it gives kids time to think about it. No, it does not. This is a big lie. On transhub.org, a project of ACON, they promote the use of what they call puberty blockers as something to pause puberty and recommend that it be used 3 to 4 times a year for kids 9 years and up. This is against the directions of the manufacturer. Don't believe me? Go and just look up Goserelin or any of the drugs that I've listed there and look for images of the instructions from the manufacturer. They put a limit of no more than 5 months for patients in late stages of cancer and endometriosis. These people with unhealthy bodies already, that even the damage that these drugs do, at least it still will help them stay alive longer. It wasn't designed for healthy young bodies, and it certainly wasn't designed to be used against their recommendations. Puberty blockers, what they call puberty blockers for these cancer and endometriosis drugs, are harmful. Early animal trials were done, and they ignored the results. The early animal trials pointed to the harm we've seen occur, in fact, in the early adopted gender clinics in Sweden and Finland, who jumped on puberty blockers first. Now they have kids as young as 11 with severe damages to their spine, joint problems, and impaired mental capability. I'm going to put links to some videos on this for you down below. And understand, once kids are on puberty blockers, it's nearly 100% they'll go on to cross-sex hormones. Cross-sex hormones cause irreversible negative effects. I'm not going to go into all the physical damages, but basically you've sterilized these kids. You've denied them a basic human right to be able to, if they choose, to have children. Surgery is the final step in the gender affirmation process, and a step that younger and younger teens are ongoing. Minors are increasingly approved for gender reassignment surgeries. Overseas, children as young as 13. Girls are now being referred for double mastectomies, and teen boys are having their genitals permanently altered and inverted or removed by gender reassignment surgeries. I have been approached by a group that have been doing FOIs from gender clinics around Australia. They've been dragging their heels providing the information. They will not confirm or deny that children as young as 13 are being treated. So for your information, if you want to pause, here's the direct quotes from Denton's Handbook to remove parental consent, and minors can choose to medically and socially transition, requiring no medical diagnosis, no surgery, and no legal oversight. So I'm going to repeat, this is an important point to mention, because these trans lobbies are the core groups that introduce and embed this ideology into Australian culture. And by doing so, by their sneaky way of just signing these states up to orders and embedding the policies, they bypass all democratic processes. They bypass our input as a public. They bypass the input of people in the organisations, in the communities, in the clubs, in any place where, in the corporations, anywhere this audit is, it bypasses the input of the larger community. So I'm saying this work needs to be exposed. Okay, so I'm going to say something. One of the other lies that they tell is this concept of being the authentic you. You change your body, you get a fake appearance of something that you're not. A boy made to appear to be a girl when they're not. A girl made to appear to be a boy when she's not. They say that this is being the authentic you. It's not. All you're playing with is appearances of something that's not true. You're putting a kid on a conveyor belt that labels and cans them to pre-packaged identity. One of the, I think it's up to 185 different identities, all, by the way, just based on sex. Is that not surprising, given the organisations that are influencing these identities, that they're all sexual orientated? These pre-packaged identities that serve a state purpose. They damage families. They put money into the corporate pockets. They put money into pharmaceutical organizations. Each child, once they get onto this, it's a subscription model in marketing terms. They're worth to pharmaceuticals at least 150K per child in their lifetime. This is good money. All this exposes yet this lie, one more lie of the gender affirmation propaganda, that this is authentic. There is nothing about this that involves the natural process of adolescence, the natural process of growing up, where you explore your talents, your likes, your dislikes. You get to know more about your family, you get engaged in hobbies, you get engaged in different sports and arts and crafts. You get to know different people and different cultures. You get to know your likes and dislikes. These are all processes of experience. It's a journey, a real physical journey, not a journey of having drugs put into you or surgery done to you or people indoctrinating you into what they think you're supposed to be. It is not a conveyor belt process that removes a child so far, far away where a natural journey of human discovery would actually take her or him. You're denying these children of their authentic self because it's their journey to take. It should not be a state or school indoctrinated process. Okay, so in defenseofchildren.org we need help. We need researchers, we need people who will share posters, parents and teachers telling their stories. We need people to get this out. We're going to be making QR codes and posters for you to share and talk about. We're going to make transgender publications. We got no money, but we're using all the time we have to do this, because if you can help, anything you can do, no matter how small, it's important. Understand the difference that makes a difference is always action. And if you do this, you'll be taking action in defense of children. So help us. The end.